Hello, welcome back to Raising Arrows Mama. Today I thought I would talk to you about literature. If you've been following along, we have been doing the Charlotte Mason's three knowledges: knowledge of God, knowledge of man, and knowledge of universe. And in this series, I've already talked about the various subjects that I think point our children towards knowledge of God. And you can go back and watch those previous videos. And now we're on the section of knowledge of man. Knowledge of man meaning things that man has created that we study in the course of our homeschool education. And today, last week I talked about history, so if you want to see that, make sure you go back and check that out. And then I also have a video up kind of delineating how we're doing history. I have more history coming soon. But today I want to talk to you about literature. If you are new here, my name is Heather. I am mama to 8 children, infant all the way up to 15, and we've been using the Charlotte Mason method roughly for about 8 years of homeschooling. Now, I will tell you in every single video that there are some wonderful videos out there. There are some great blog posts and some amazing books that all point you towards Charlotte Mason education. But first and foremost is Charlotte Mason's actual words. If you want to educate your children in a Charlotte Mason method, you eventually need to pick up her words. Now, you don't have to get this beautiful copy from Living Book Press, which I absolutely love. They also have paperback. There are pink editions. There's ones that you can annotate from Simply Charlotte Mason. You can listen to most of them online somewhere. Amblesite Online has it for free. You can just go to their website, go to the Charlotte Mason Home Education Series, and you can read every volume. And you can also read it in a modern translation if this is a little much for you. Because if you remember, Charlotte Mason is writing in the early 1900s. Her way of writing, it's hard to get into at first. I needed a book club to help me really get into it at first. And it has a little bit of a learning curve. But once you get in it, you'll love it. You'll understand better how to educate your children in the Charlotte Mason method. So that is my caveat at the beginning of almost all of these videos. And that's why I'm going through her volume 6, Philosophy of Education. This is the last volume I have to read myself. And so as I'm reading through it, I'm sharing different things. And I have gone straight to the knowledges and kind of the curriculum things because that's what's important on everybody's mind right now. I can give you all the philosophy things, but it's crunch time and back to school time, and nobody's gonna really pay attention to that at this moment. Come later this year, hopefully we can go back and visit some of the philosophy of education that is really what you need to know before you start implementing the methods. But I understand, I've been there where it's crunch time and I need to know, what do I do? So let's get to the meat of the subject. So we're going to talk about literature, and it's a very short section in here. She talks about literature in all of her books, as you can imagine, in a literature-based education model. I'm going to give you a quick narration of the short chapter that she has here. In her Knowledge of Man literature section, she tells you for each form what she would expect them to be reading. And she kind of breaks it down in that way, and she gives you some encouragement along the way and a few titles that may interest you. And as someone who has utilized part of the Amblesite Online reading list, which has most of these titles, some of those titles, many of those titles are still really good today, 100 years later. So first up, she talks about the early years and what you're going to start with. And when you're in, she has form, her A's, B's are different. It's a whole England thing. Basically in first grade, that first year, you're going to start out with those heroes, the tales. You're not going to necessarily dive into some deep, we're not going to read the original Homer to them in Greek. We might read a children's version. She uses Andrew Lang as an example. We are going to share those tales. For us, that would be like American Tall Tales are a great thing to throw in there. Some of those history heroes that you've heard about, those kind of things that pique their interest, that get them interested in the world and beyond what their little play area is. And I love year 1. First graders are a hoot, and you can really get them excited about a lot of different things. So why not give them sometimes some harder topics? We love, I can't think of what I have the Living Book Press version, and it's like 50 famous stories retold, and they're short little chapters, and they get the kids so interested. But anyways, she gives some suggestions about what to do. You're really focusing on the heroes. And then she goes on through the rest of it, and she says it, I think, 3 or 4 times. Your literature is going to coincide with your history readings. So whatever century time period you're studying, your literature should reflect that. I personally don't follow that rule, but that's okay. It's great option, and it really does help to reinforce what they're learning in history, whether it is written in that time period or if it is just set in that time period. And that is wonderful and is very, very helpful to their studies. A lot of times we consider them historical fiction will go into there and things like that. And so she goes through about how you're going to do that. She says that in 2nd grade, you're still going to be reading most of that to them. But by 3rd grade, they should be reading most of their literature independently. By the time they get to 4th grade and up, they're reading these independently. They're doing oral and written narrations with them. And it should really coincide with their history studies. And you continue on through to the middle school years where you're giving them a higher level each time, is what she says. And again, she gives those suggestions of books to, kind of as an example, not that you must read Alice Through the Looking Glass, but that you know what age level, what range of reading level she's thinking for that grade. By the time you get to high school, one of the things that she said throughout is that you were giving them the unabridged. I like that she says there was like a study and that the unabridged was not it. The kids actually like the dry parts, guys. Don't give them the abridged, give them the unabridged, because the kids like the dry parts. That's like a specific quote. They like the dry parts. They enjoy all of that other stuff. And some of that is also a mental growing through reading, is reading through some of those parts that are maybe a little trickier in writing. And that is perfect. That's what they need in those middle school years. So don't think, oh, this is too much for them. I'll just give them the unabridged, or I'll give them the abridged. I keep saying it backwards, sorry. Don't give them the shortened versions. Give them the real thing. You know, there are a million Robin Hoods out there. But why give them Pyle's abridged version, which shortened and all the good stuff is cut out? Give them the real thing. And I have noticed this, there's a whole series of abridged literature called like the Great Illustrated Classics or something like that. And they're very popular. Those are the ones I'm actually seeing libraries get rid of the originals and keep those, which is heartbreaking. But my kids have picked them up and been like, that was horrible, because they cut out all the beauty and all the good writing and leave short, choppy sentences that still tell the story, but has lost a lot of the beauty of what it really was. And the fact that my kids pointed that out as they picked them up, not something I said, they picked it up at the library. I said, you may read it, that's fine, but just remember, this is not the full text. This is just part of it. And my oldest, because she's like her mama, she read one that she had read the original unabridged, and I can't even remember what classic it was now. And then she read the abridged one. She's like, that was terrible. They cut out all the good stuff. So just keep that in mind. And then as you get to high school, that's when she starts suggesting some anthologies. A little bit is in those middle school and high school years, to give an overview of literature, because there's no way you can read all of literature. And so you're going to read an anthology that's going to, you read the time that goes along with you, what you're studying. And that's just to give your kids an overview of it and to entice them to want to learn more later. And it does work. My children have been reading H.E. Marshall's English Literature for Boys and Girls, which is a comparable book to what she suggests. And that my oldest has read some, and she's then later looked for that author at the library because she read a section in there. It also helps them to read a little bit about things that they may never read about. Like Edgar Allan Poe is somebody my kids really need to know about. But my oldest, she has anxiety issues. She's never, ever going to read Edgar Allan Poe just for fun. But that's a cultural thing. She needs to know him. And so the anthology was very helpful for that. And so that's what's going on in that chapter. I'm going to read you a couple of my quotes and then see if there's anything else that I need to kind of tack in. So at the very beginning of this section, which it starts on page 180, and as you can see, I am very much noting it up here. That's just the way I like to read. But she is talking about that very beginning stage, and she says, no beautiful thought or bold figure escapes them. And that's talking about that early elementary age where they just absolutely love stories. They just thrive on them. And when you find one that just really, it just clicks, they know it all. They tell you everything. And, think about that time when your kid won't shut up about a game or TV show or an activity that they made up, and they're just telling you every little thing. That's what these stories can do for kids at that age. And I have seen it both when I taught kindergarten and also, again, with my own children repeatedly and with other kids because I love asking them about what they've read recently. It's amazing the thoughts that come from them because they can tell you every single thing that happened. They can tell you who was involved in all these different things, but they can also find beautiful points that you maybe didn't find out or didn't think of. I absolutely love it. I will say that in that section, she recommends, fairy tales, Grimm, Anderson, all of those, Aesop's Fables. She has Miss Gaddy's Parables from Nature. We did try that and we did not enjoy it, but there are other people who love it. I mean, it is beautiful, but it was not enjoyable for any of us. But that, again, could have been the reader, my issue, because I didn't enjoy it. And then there is Pilgrim's Progress, of course, which we've talked about, and I talk about in my Christian reading section. And then she goes on to say, the great tales of the heroic age find their way to children's hearts. And that's what you want in those early years. You want them to just be just soaking up all of the history and the literature and the just mighty things that they've heard, and it just to take root in their heart so that later on when they hear these things again, they're piqued and they are interested in them more. I also love, as you keep going, she starts to talk about Form 2, which is upper elementary grades. And she says it's a considerable program of reading that is not the mere mechanical exercise of reading, but the reading of certain books. So we don't want to just give them anything. By the time they're in 4th grade, we want to make sure we are being intentional about their reading and what they're giving them. And she goes on to give some examples, like you're going to actually have them do most of it on their own, but there's still going to be some things that you're going to have that you read with them. You want to read your Shakespeare with them. If you're going to read anything Sir Scott, you're going to want to read it out loud. She gives Rob Roy and Culver's Travels as suggestions. We opted for other options at that time because my kids said, that's too many boy books. But I digress. And then you're going to move on from that into those older grades. And then you're going to have the Age of Fable. Maybe you're going to have Kidnapped. Loved Kidnapped. Great book. And in this point, the whole thing that you're doing is you're having them read, but do not skip the narration part. She says, just so in their small degree do the children narrate. They see it all so vividly that when you read or hear their versions, the theme is illuminated for you too. You want your children to be able to tell back. That's what narrate is. Tell back, either written, typed, acted out, or just orally spoken to you. You want them to be able to tell you back, not just this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. Point A, point B, point C. You want them to really know it. Not that I can question them and get them caught up and try to find where they don't know something, but I want them to just know the story and to see what its purpose is. And sometimes, maybe there's a chapter that's lacking a little, but hopefully by the next time they're putting pieces together a little bit more. And then she has this wonderful, wonderful quote. It says, we spread an abundant and delicate feast in the programs, and each small guest assimilates what he can. And so if you're new to Charlotte Mason, this may sound crazy, but over and over, she relates education to a feast, to this food. Just as if you went to a party and you had all this great food, you're going to pick and choose some. You're never going to eat you're not going to eat the whole dessert table. You're not going to eat all the entree. You're going to pick and choose certain things, and some things you'll leave behind. And that's how our education is. We're giving them this wide array of education, and we're going to give them history and literature, and we're going to give them mythology, and we're going to give them poetry, and we're going to give them folk songs, and we're going to give them all these different things, and they're going to pick and choose. Now, we're offering all of them, and we may force them to try a little bit of each of them, but they're going to assimilate what they can. And that same goes with literature. They're going to read all these books. and they're going to assimilate what they can from it. The problem we find a lot of times in literature programs today is that they either are a teacher focusing you towards a specific point, which may or may not be what you gleaned from the reading, or it is a program focusing you on learning how to take tests and answer questions about plot, character, things like that, whereas you miss the big picture of the story, or you miss the beauty of the writing, or all of those things combined. And so when we are doing narrating, we're letting them read and tell us what they get from it. Now, there may be some pivotal point, like, they don't understand who Fagin is and Oliver Twist. And so we need to kind of point out, okay, well, he's a thief, he may have to go into more discussions like that if your kid's like, I don't know what's going on and what's going on with Fagin, and, and so you may have to help them along the way. But in general, you want them to assimilate and take what they are and not try to force a specific line or moral through their readings. And then as we continue on, she talks about Form 3 and 4, which is going to be 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And they are having just more reading. And that's where you get that compilation. They're going to get an overview. And she gives a little caveat here that the portion read each term, say 50 pages, corresponds with the period covered in history studies. And the book is a great favorite with children. So, choose books that are going to be good. And that does take time if you're doing it yourself. You got to read them. You got to listen to them. Audiobooks are a great help to a mama. But you have to choose those, or find trusted book lists that you can choose from. And, this is the part where she says they take pleasure in those dry parts. Don't cut out. Don't give them less than. Give them the real thing. And then it goes on as she's talking about high school, about the anthologies and giving them all of this. And I just want to read you the last paragraph. I know this is getting a little bit longer, but she just puts it so well. And usually you can read the last paragraph and just be like, chef's kiss. That's what we need. So she tells us in the end, she says, as for the amount covered in each form, it is probably about the amount most of us cover in the period of time included in a school term. But while we grown-ups persons read and forget because we do not take the pains to know as we read, these young students have the powers of perfect recollection and just application because they have read with attention and concentration and have in every case reproduced what they have read in narration or the gist of some portion of it in their writing. The children's answers in their examination papers show the literature has become a living power in the minds of these young people. And so with that, I'll leave you. Charlotte Mason wants this literature to become a living power for them. It is not only giving them great broad thoughts for the world and how things work, but it is also this living power of recollection and learning that they get along the way, because they are able to reproduce it through narration. They have a greater understanding than if they had done kind of the studies we did growing up, where you would just, answer a couple questions and then you turn it in. Yay, I got it right. And then you forget all about it. We are using literature and taking those habits of attention and observation and focusing our children into it to really learn through that single reading, through narration, and they're able to tell us back. Now, I did make mention that I don't necessarily follow some of her rules on here, and so I have another video, if you are just dying to know, called Modern versus Classic Literature, if you want to go check that out. Otherwise, I will have a video up shortly talking about our literature choices for this school year. Thank you so much for watching and have a blessed day.